Unless you've been living under a rock for the past year, you've witnessed the overwhelming attention that by now psychologist, public intellectual, and YouTube celebrity Jordan Peterson has received. He's been highly controversial on a number of different issues, but the one that we'll address in this video is his views on morality. Peterson is widely known for saying that there can be no objective moral truths without religion. But given the typical connotations associated with this view, it is extremely easy to misconstrue his position. When Peterson refers to religion and God, ambiguous as he might sound, he is not necessarily referring to the stereotypical bearded man in the sky. Now, this is not a statement of personal agreement with Peterson, but rather a well-intentioned attempt to properly represent his views. Human beings are the result of an evolutionary process of millions of years, from our precursor unicellular organisms to the tribal and cognitively advanced primates. Whatever it is that led these species to propagate was at least partially related to behavior. As anatomically modern human beings, roughly 100,000 years ago, we dwelled in caves and depended on a relatively small tribe of people. We cooperated in ways that were crucial to our survival. Some people would go outside and hunt prey, others would collect fruits and plants, and yet others would stay home taking care of infants. The stability of our entire group, and by extension of our species, depended on group coordination and a solid hierarchical structure. This hierarchical structure was merely acted out and implicitly assumed, way before any sort of coherent and explicit form of language emerged. If anyone behaved in a way that was at odds with what was implicitly established, the group's chances for survival would be diminished. To give a simple example, imagine that in any given group, there was someone that decided to lie and cheat the system. Imagine that instead of providing his fair share of labor, say recollect water down the river, he decided to take away from the labor of his in-groups and pretend that he had gone and looked for the water, but unfortunately found none. Now, imagine that after a while, more and more tribe members began to act this way. The guy in charge of hunting tried to get away with working less, the infants were treated negligently, and so on. It eventually becomes clear that the whole group would collapse and the entirety of their members would perish. Hence, dishonesty in trying to cheat the group was something deemed pernicious to survival and reproduction. Given that those members of our species who survived were keenly aware of the maladies that could come along with lying, their genetic successors inherited this aversion towards lies. This is where our moral intuitions come. Many of the things that we deem to be right or wrong emerge fundamentally from these moral intuitions that are in turn the result of a complex and lengthy evolutionary process. It is many, many years later, with the development of language, that the things that were previously only acted out were made known in an explicit manner through religion. Hence, the commandments of not murdering, not lying, etc. What Peterson is trying to say is that the existence of these moral values did not come about by religious scripture, but rather from this underlying morally formative process. The religious writings merely make these intuitions crucial to our survival explicit. And so, for the rationalist secularist to come along and say that moral principles can be logically derived is in his eyes preposterous, given that the explicit linguistic articulation of these structures are just the top layer of the cake. I mean, sure, you can say that murdering innocent people is bad, and give a host of perfectly justifiable reasons of why that is the case. But the fundamental sort of hunch that buttresses these logical derivations comes from the way your distant ancestors lived. You can imagine a cake where the bottom layer is composed of tacitly assumed hierarchies and ways of acting that were crucial to our survival. Then, on top of that, comes narratives of people who lived and progressed under these hierarchies. And then on top of that are narratives of those narratives, aka monotheistic religions. So when Peterson says that morality is unlikely to exist objectively without religion, he is not necessarily referring to a literal metaphysical entity, although he certainly hasn't precluded that possibility. Well, this is the end. Thanks guys, thanks for watching. Please let me know what you think in the comment section, and like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video.